Oh, we're live. Would you
We
look at
are.
that? We're back. Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Awesome.
Having a good time. Where's our name cards? I think they
Oh, yeah, we turned our name cards off. Hold on. Let's review those really quickly before we turn them back on instantly.
oh, see what we put. Well,
see,
hey
see what we
everybody.
forgot.
Thanks for tuning in live online today, and for those watching again in the future, we do appreciate it. This is an exciting week here at GPS Live for the week of June 7th, 2024. And as always, I am Jonathan Singer.
And I am Tristan Morris, and we are very excited to be starting a brand new month. it's,
We
it's
are.
it's great.
Oh, did
We're
we?
kind of
We did lose our titles. Okay, well, it's too late to try to make new ones right now, but I think
too
we'll
late to
we'll
do
just go
so.
with it.
We'll just run with it. In the meantime, y'all can make up in your heads what our catchy titles would be based on the stories that we have this week. In fact, that would be a great thing. Let us know where you're watching from, and let us know what you think our titles would be in the comments. My window's open, and I think I hear a siren coming, so I'm going to close that. Jonathan and I are here to talk about the news stories that we have found for the week. Some interesting stuff. It's been a really busy week on the news front. But before we get into any of those things, what we do need to say is that the views and opinions that we express are not necessarily the official views of GuidePoint Security. We're just two guys talking about interesting news stories that we found. And on top of that, any company that we mention, because it's cybersecurity, so right, we talk about attacks against specific companies. We are not like endorsing or lecturing companies or anything like that. Right, it's just we're talking about the news and the particulars of attacks as they happen.
Yeah, but with that in mind, as you said, there's a ton of stuff going on. I had a great week this week. Tristan, you have a good time? How was your last week?
I had a great last week. Had a lot of fun doing some real good work here at GuidePoint. Doing some fun stuff. We've got the Great Ransomware Report coming out next week,
Yeah,
which
looking forward to it.
is a lot of fun. We're looking at some really good reporting and data there. We have some stories that this week that could be potentially influenced by that great report. But yeah, I had a great week. You ready to dive in?
I think it's time because like I said, there's a lot to cover, and it's going to relate to what we've been covering for the past couple weeks. In fact,
Yeah.
our first story coming to us from Ars Technica, and also a bit from Wired to
Wired,
go
yeah.
along with it, is the Ticketmaster breach wasn't as simple on its surface as it seemed. Right, we didn't have a whole lot of details at the time, but now more information is coming out. And this looks like it may be one of those third-party risk or platform-related issues that's much bigger than what we thought.
Well, interestingly, potentially platform
Potentially,
related,
we're still
potentially
learning
platform related,
more.
but also just potentially related to maybe bad security practices,
Yeah.
right? And like just a strange common thread. But specifically, we talked about Ticketmaster last week and the Ticketmaster Live Nation breach and the fact that had revived breach forums, right? And so there was a lot of credentials and a lot of customer data suddenly posted that was all related back to Ticketmaster. Well, according to this Ars Technica article, Ticketmaster disclosed that last Friday, and then told TechCrunch that hackers had gained access to that data stored in an unnamed third-party provider, and then came back and told TechCrunch, "Oh, that provider was actually a company called Snowflake."
Yes. Now, for those of you who don't know, right, from a platform perspective, if you're going to take all of your corporate company data and put it somewhere like AWS, Azure, right, one of these places, Google, you would hope to expect that that data is safe. But in this case, it's a little bit more beyond that because there are technically accounts that access that data. And we've talked
Right.
about stuff like API keys historically on the show, where if you have one piece of software interacting with another piece of software to collect information and pass it back and forth, you don't want that API key breach. But in this case, from what our understanding is that the account credentials of a number of these different companies were in fact stolen one way or another, whether they were sold on the dark web, whether they were caught with password reuse from other breaches, or if there was some kind of password spray attack. We're still learning more about it. From what it's seeing, it seems like Snowflake was being targeted because they are the holder of a lot of these big companies' data.
Yeah. So that's where the story kind of gets interesting, right? Is that it's companies ranging across a wide swath of a wide swath of different verticals. You've got banks like Santander. Is it Santander? Santander?
In America, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah, yeah, I guess it's Santander. Ticketmaster and a whole host of other companies now that have started to fall to this. And like you mentioned, right, there's no really telling where those credentials that were initially used to access this came from. But there is one pivotal thing that has been called out in this, and that is that according to Snowflake, it looks like those customers did not have multi-factor authentication turned on for access to their Snowflake repositories.
Yeah. Now, without playing too much, this snowball effect that's happening here is that more accounts are being discovered to not have multi-factor enabled. And again, this is something that we've talked about here on the show, and we preach it left and right. If there was a church of MFA, we would be the founding members, is that you must have something more than just a username and a password these days. It really puts you in a compromising position. And so Snowflake appears to have a number of accounts involved in these breaches with just username and password. And given modern times, it's almost becoming trivial to get a hold of these types of things. And by simply having that, message that gets sent to your phone, that third-party app like Authenticator, something else, right? That what you have, what you know, what you are, is really going to step the game up. And as we're reading through these articles and trying to understand, because they don't want to give everything away. We're kind of trying to see what's going on between the lines. And as more information comes out regarding the research on this and then the blog posts, we'll be able to fill, our viewers in. But it seems like the basis of this is welcome to our platform. Please make sure that you're using us securely.
Yeah, and specifically too to dive into the kind of research that is going on there, right? Someone cited in this Ars Technica article is Kevin Beaumont, a security researcher. He posted on Mastodon. Go Mastodon, go federated social media. Right. Posted on Mastodon about this and some findings. And specifically the group that is claiming responsibility for these breaches, I believe called Shiny Hunters, has been posting this information and putting it up for sale. Kevin Beaumont, who did not name Shiny Hunters, right, but they have claimed credit for a lot of this. He described the group behind the breaches, right, as a teen crimeware group who've been active publicly on Telegram for a while and regularly relies on info-stealer malware to obtain sensitive credentials. So that's Kevin Beaumont's take on the group that could potentially be behind all of this. But there's quite a long list of companies that Shiny Hunters has claimed responsibility for. And like we said, right, it all comes back to that lack of multi-factor authentication. But you mentioned, while we talked about MFA, right, getting the texts potentially from those groups, and that actually or from those companies as your MFA, that leads into our next story a little bit, to kind of tangentially. So let's start talking about TikTok takeover. This is my favorite little pun that I've come up with in a while. But TikTok takeover, it turns out that there was a new 0-day discovered within the TikTok social media application. I don't think I've ever said anything more like a news host than I did just there, calling it the TikTok social media application. But a 0-day was discovered last week or made public last week within TikTok that allowed account takeover just by sending a direct message to the account you wanted to target. And this hit a lot of high profile accounts, including Sony, CNN, Paris Hilton, quite a few people and companies were hit by this attack. And there's not a ton to the story, but I think there is some good conversation to have.
Yeah. Now, as we slide into the DMs here to exactly understand what's going on, sorry, though, I had to pull that line. If you're watching this live, please let us know in the comments how much you appreciated that one.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, it's just something as simple as sending a DM from one user to another within the platform, and that led to an account takeover. Now, the good news is that this has very quickly, in fact, been addressed, acknowledged, and patched
Yeah.
and pushed out. But as you said, there is a bigger discussion here because by simply sending malicious datagrams, right, whatever these payloads may be, from one platform or from one device to another within a singular platform is something we see very often, right? And
Yeah.
by no means is TikTok the only kind of victim in this type of scenario. We've
Right.
seen this years ago with something like iMessage, for instance, where you can send a crafted text message. Don't do this, kids. It's from one iPhone to another, and it would crash the other iPhone.
Yeah, and in that case, it relied on, I believe, special zero width characters.
Yeah.
Right. So there were special zero width characters that you could just insert into the text message, or into the message that you were sending, and the iPhone that received it would not be able to interpret it, and that would then take it down. We don't know the details of what the message that was sent, on TikTok, like what that was, but the fact that it simply required the message to be opened, right? Is important here. And actually, we got a comment during our last story from Edward Moore, who mentioned, like, hey, if they don't have MFA turned on, right, is that company negligence? Like, if you're a CISO for a company that is using something like a cloud storage platform, right, and you're not insisting that your company turn MFA on in the platforms that you're using, like, how is that not a day one implementation? And that's something that you and I were talking about before, right? CISO responsibility, just specifically with this TikTok account takeover. Because something that I think a lot of companies may not really think about is the fact that your social media, right? Any social media presence that you have is kind of a vital part of your brand and your brand reputation now. And so if someone can take that over and start posting erroneous stuff on your brand pages, that can be extremely harmful. And they can also, as a form of ransomware, take that over and refuse to give it back to you. And when you think about most companies that I've worked with and that I talk to, generally put interns in charge of something like social media, right? Are you educating them on, like, hey, like it is their job to open and read DMs, right? And so the concept of, hey, like, it ultimately still, even though it may seem petty and kind of outside of the realm of cybersecurity, right? Security of your social media platforms, but does fall back to the CISO again. Like, and so are we taking these kind of day one steps to say, how do we address it if something like this happens?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things going on here, right? Another one of the discussion points we had during before the show was about what happens when an incident like this occurs. Although it isn't necessarily like an internal production server, it's still something reputationally based, especially if you're a publicly traded company or a large international conglomerate. These things have a direct effect on things. So making sure that you have that. What was the term we were using?
Like a crisis response
Crisis,
plan.
yes, like a crisis team response, especially if you have some kind of cyber insurance that handles that kind of thing for you. It's something that you need to be ready for, ready to. I know I'm losing it today, but ready to deploy when these kinds of things happen, right?
Yeah, and oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, and also, just the breadth and speed that this actually was resolved is great to hear. We see this kind of thing when we go to like Pwn2Own, right? And Chrome is now rolling out new updates within days to address some of these ODAs that aren't even public or even being exploited in the wild, but still taking the initiative to get it done. And so, to the TikTok team that got this identified, patched, and rolled out pretty quickly, like that's awesome to see.
Yeah, incredible. And I mentioned earlier when we were kind of dovetailing out of our last story, right? You mentioned SMS as a multi-factor authentication option, but something that I do want to point out.
I'm not endorsing it as a good one.
You're not endorsing it.
It exists. It needs to actually be declining, and we should be using one-time tokens. But anyways,
yeah, exactly. But the thing that I wanted to point out is that this is not the first time that TikTok has had account takeover issues, and one of them specifically was the fact that they were leveraging SMS for multi-factor authentication, and so there was a huge swath of I believe it was in another country, but there was a huge number of accounts that were that were taken over because SMS is not a secure multi-factor authentication method, right? It's the prevalence of things like SIM stealing and SIM swapping, and the ease with which you can kind of take over a phone number for just the 10 seconds that you need to in order to grab that SMS token. It brings it back to the idea of like, hey, as the CISO, right? If MFA is turned on, make sure it's a good MFA, right? Like all of these things kind of like converge and join together.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird, I don't know, thought process in a day and age where you as a business need to be on a social media platform to engage and interact with your potential customers and clients.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've gone on Twitter and, DM'd businesses when I was displeased with things and let them know. And actually, it was incredible to get a response very quickly. It almost seems like it's the only way to interact with large companies these days for your voice to be heard. But it is truly another outlet that you need to keep an eye on. There are a number of players also in the cybersecurity space that focus on this kind of thing, whether it's dark web chatter or whether it's social media, account takeovers or brand related forgeries. And these all again are going to fall back under that security wing as marketing related or as customer sales related as it may seem. The security and the impact of them still holds pretty heavy weight around the cyber parts, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Now, before we've got one other kind of big story that we want to talk about, but I think we should kind of save it for the end because it's finally one of those good ones.
Yeah.
But we don't have some banners prepared for the next couple stories that we're going to talk about here. But I want to jump really quickly because we're talking about account takeovers and we're talking about compromising credentials and such. I'd like to jump to this story from the Register.
Mm-hmm.
About the U.S. government currently seeking permission to freeze and recover over $5 million that has been stolen from a trade union in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And the reason that I want to jump to the story from what we were just talking about is specifically because this $5.3 million has been traced back to 7 bank accounts across a whole host of outside countries. And at the heart of the entire thing, though, is the fact that it took place over a business email compromise, right? So what happened in this particular story is there's a trade union in I believe in Dorchester, Mass. I can't remember.
How did you say it? What was that?
I said Dorchester because I was like, wait, I can't remember. I lived in Massachusetts and I can't remember which.
You don't even know how to say it in Massachusetts.
Is Dorchester or Worcester, whatever. It's producer Ben, who currently lives in the Northeast. Ben, you want to come in here and correct me real quickly here? Ben, what am I trying to say?
Dorchester.
Okay. Yeah, see, I got the CH right. I got it right. Okay. But this trade union in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and their investment manager would send emails back and forth, obviously, because they have to communicate about the investments that are being made. But in late January, this cyber criminal group spoofed the investment manager's email address using a domain that was almost identical to the genuine address, except for a single character.
Yeah, that kind of typo spotting attack is still very common to these days. And without certain types of email technology and security tools in place, it could accidentally make its way in. There's 2 main roads of thought here is how do we stop our own employees' accounts from being taken over, from sending from the inside? But still, one of those most basic things is how do you protect outside emails that are trying to do damage from ever making their way in? And realistically, at the end of the day, these aren't computer companies. These aren't cyber companies. These are, like you said, unions and smaller trades, completely unrelated to technology. And oftentimes are targeted to be taken advantage of because they don't have a lot of those measures in place that maybe a more tech-focused business would have. And so whatever your industry is, whatever you're doing out there, the fact that you have a computer means you need to take cybersecurity seriously. And in this example, the attack coming in through social engineering and phishing of an email to target a conversation and potentially say, hey, here's a new bank and routing information. Right? We see this all the time in real estate. When's the last time every realtor says you need to call me on the same number I called you to validate and verify that the banking and routing information is correct, or else your money will disappear.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something that we need to share in our communities to be aware of.
Yeah. The Justice Department said that business email compromise scams are rife, and they've estimated daily losses to business email compromise at $8 million just on business email compromise alone. And given the ease with which this can be done, right? Because you can get very sophisticated with business email compromise, right? You can find some credentials somewhere, log into someone's account, track all of the emails that they're sending back and forth until you find a whale, just take over their account entirely and send an email. Or you can do something as simple as say, like, there's like a 90% chance that, this business would receive an email from this organization asking for money. Mm-hmm. I'll just go ahead and do that. In fact, there was a story recently, I think, about that, about a guy who just realized that he could start squatting on domains that looked like other companies and just sending invoices to companies that might use those services.
They would send procurement teams random invoices to random procurement teams around different businesses just to see if any of them would just automatically pay the bill.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you can so easily spin this kind of thing up. It's just a reminder to, hey, always be on the lookout for these kinds of things. But we've got two more quick stories to talk about. Just as kind of a like, hey, we saw it, we know that it happened, and we don't want to just not address it. But a major ransomware attack against the National Health Service in the UK has shut down several hospitals in London, and they have had to stop and cancel procedures. And there's not much that's really unique or different to this story, particularly with ransomware, from things that we've seen before. But what we did want to mention, because we were talking about this beforehand, is the shift that's happened over the last couple of years. It feels like just a couple of years ago, major ransomware organizations and stories about them were always kind of tagged with this knowledge that the large ransomware groups had rules against hitting services like hospitals or vital life services and taking them down. And recently we've seen this huge uptick and proliferation in attacks against the very organizations that used to be kind of on the blacklist.
Yeah, one of the quotes actually coming to us from the independent .co.uk article is that the individuals behind this have no scruple about who their actions affect. And that's just, goes to extend on the conversation we had earlier in a previous show about the, just the state of healthcare and cybersecurity affecting things across entire countries. We've seen it here in the United States. We're seeing the effects in England. We've seen this in other countries too. And it seems like, oh, well, what happened to not hurting individuals? In this particular case, it's called out that all non-emergency operations have been canceled, and also blood tests are now being delayed. And so there is a direct impact and direct correlation to these actions, those affected by it.
Specifically to people who need organ transplants, because they have to have last-minute blood checks done. Excuse me. Got something in my throat there. So blood tests can't be cross-checked because of this. And so transplants have been put on hold. But as we kind of come into the end here to wrap things up, right? While that's a tragedy, what's happening at the NHS with this, and the fact that these are becoming more prevalent, there has been a string of great news surrounding Lockbit, particularly, and the fact that a multinational law enforcement team was able to go in and take down key Lockbit infrastructure and start to remove them. If you're not aware for some reason of Lockbit's presence and role within ransomware, they are by far the most prevalent and largest player within the ransomware space. In grit report after grit report from the GuidePoint Research and Intelligence team here about ransomware, right? Report after report about ransomware, Lockbit always the number one player, except for I believe one very particular report in which a different group took over because of a massive compromise. But right, they're consistently at the top, and they're able to take them down. But the great thing is, the FBI have just released a huge amount of decryptors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about huge amount, we're talking about 7,000 decryption keys, because that's coming from 7,000 victims around the world. There's also a number of other captures in this, right? Authorities have captured 34 different servers. They've frozen 200 cryptocurrency accounts. All right, this accounts for the $1 billion in extorted damages that we've seen just from Lockbit alone. And so this bit of good news really is making waves across the internet. If you or somebody you know is one of those 7,000 companies that have been affected by Lockbit, you can or potentially find your decryption key, and that stuff is now being made available online by simply going to ic3.gov.
ic3.gov. Yep, the Internet Crime Complaint Center. You can head there if you've been a victim of Lockbit. And the incredible thing about this is that, for people who couldn't afford to pay the ransom or were unable to for some reason, right? There are plenty of legality issues around paying ransomwares, right? And engaging with criminal organizations. So in some cases, months and years have gone by where these companies have not been able to access data that was encrypted, and they've managed to move on from that, but obviously suffered great losses because of those setbacks. And so now the release of these decryption keys for these over 7,000 victims makes it possible to kind of finally go back and patchwork together the rest of what was missing and fully get up and running.
Now, one of the key details we do want to mention as part of this is these are the decryption keys for your files on the systems that were affected. This doesn't stop extortion from happening with regards to releasing of data. That may still happen, as we've seen Lockbit kind of ebb and flow, and as its different players have been arrested over the years or other people involved are being discovered. The other thing also is that this dismantling is, as far as we've gotten up to now, but just keep in mind that, there is a continued effort to put a stop to this and other, ransomware groups too. And I know for those that are interested in their podcast Cyber Sleuths, the U.S. State Department is offering, a very hefty and healthy
$10 million for information.
Yes. That can help to lead to the arrest or conviction of the leaders of Lockbit. We've already seen some individuals being arrested as part of that. But also, if you have done business with Lockbit, there's an additional $5 million that is coming after you.
Yep. So the Lockbit is a ransomware as a service group, and so they have many affiliates. And so if you have information that can lead to the arrest or conviction of affiliate groups and leaders, that's $5 million, $10 million for I guess Lockbit Prime, right? The actual staff themselves. But like you mentioned, some people have already been arrested. And last month we covered this, but authorities, I'm trying to remember. There was a name. Was it Operation Kronos? Was that what it was?
Yes.
Kronos, the international group responsible for this takedown, actually named who they believe the Lockbit leader to be, Yuryevich Koroshev. And so that's just really great, a great way to kind of end the day here with cybersecurity news.
All righty. Well, with that, we are officially at the top of the hour. We will be back next week with some more exciting stories and some more exciting titles. In the meantime, this has been GPS Live for the week of June 7th, 2024. And I am Jonathan Singer.
And I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris. And we will catch you all next time.
Take it.
Bye.